Good afternoon and welcome to the third part of the Sustainaffinity webinar series. My name is Lee Timms from Clarity Sustainability. We're a green marketing and sustainability communications agency based just outside London in the UK. We do lots from CSR reporting through to low impact exhibition stands, sustainability campaigns, taking greener products to market, all those sorts of good things. So our agenda for today is to cover effective green marketing. So first of all, we're going to look at the marketplace, and I'm going to give you a bit of an overview as to some of the effective techniques out there and some good practice that we see in the marketplace. And then we're going to move on to a case study which examples a lot of this really well from 3663. So to start with, what actually is green marketing? It goes by several names: ethical marketing, sustainability communications, in some ways CSR, and environmental promotion. Whatever you call it, essentially the same thing, a different way of cutting it. Using sustainability as a source of innovation, the basis for competitive advantage. It's a bit like any other sort of competitive advantage, whether that's price, quality, niching. The importance there, we believe, is that we're not just focusing on the customer, but we're actually looking at the other stakeholder considerations. We're looking at sustainability's influence on brands, the product and service, the fact that then it plays out in the communications, and all of this comes together as part of the green marketing and sustainability communications exercise. It's a really integrated, holistic piece. It's not just this one set of promotion, which is where you start to get into the greenwash sphere, or at the very least going out with something that isn't necessarily seen as that credible by stakeholders and won't necessarily get them bought in or give them the advantage that potentially that you're looking for. More developing economies sit at the top of this table, possibly demonstrating a link between the maturity of the economy, how long they've been exposed to these sustainability issues in the mainstream, and the effect that that has on their stated perceptions, and potentially through to how much those behaviours have kind of moved into the norm, and therefore not necessarily a kind of top of mind consideration. It's something that they start to automate a bit more. Double-click Performix, which shows that all things equal, so that's cost, quality and convenience, people would choose the greener option. Who will pay more though, or anything at all for that matter, depends on the segments. It depends on the propensity to price switch, which everyone has at some level in every single segment. A comprehensive DEFRA study into the segmentation, also green communications, found that 2/3 of the sample will seek information on the packaging to help them make their choices more environmentally preferable. But the same amount, roughly, also agree that the information shown on most packaging is difficult to understand. So what are the actions that people are taking? This data from Natural Marketing Institute shows that generally people will frequently take easier, cheaper options towards the top of the graph, things like turning down the thermostat, saving water, changing the light bulbs, those sorts of things that are really easy and quick to do. However, these are a bit of a no-brainer, and some segments are more inclined to do these things rather than others, as we'll cover later. But as we move down the graph, we'll see that the proportion of the segment that are involved in doing those other things, generally things that have got higher costs in terms of financial or time resource, actually goes down. The inconvenience of something like carpooling or public transport goes up. So fairly common sense, but it does confirm to us what a lot of us know to be true. There are indeed many barriers that can get in the way of more sustainable behaviours and people's good intentions, the things that people would like to do at an attitudinal level. EarthSense found that discouraging reasons can be captured in some of the following. The top one being lack of trust in the claims being made by organisations. What we've really got to take away from this is a very clear key message, is that the damage that greenwash can do That's why it's crucial for us to work with best practice in claims, thorough substantiation, actually building trust with our stakeholders. The second to fourth points in the graph all look at what's called the tragedy of the commons, people discouraged from making an effort because they feel that others, whether that's individuals, companies, governments, even countries, just aren't pulling their weight. Or why should we do this in the UK if India and China are developing so fast with such a big population and they're maybe not making their effort? That's the sort of perception that some people can have. It just doesn't feel fair to them. They feel that the effort that they're making and the results that they'll achieve will be too small as part of the overall global picture to actually make a difference. This is particularly true of some segments that we'll look at later. Yet, as we know as sustainability professionals, that small steps are what come together to make the big difference, and that's why we really need to encourage and empower people to make these changes where possible, and where there isn't difficulty in doing so, actually take some of the decision out of their hands through more preferable models of the same piece. Other discouraging factors include the difference in cost. So, for example, fresh veg costing more than bulk pack or frozen vegetables. Green not seen as being an important aspect of that particular category of product or service. Or the labelled information, for instance, is just outright confusing. The language we use also needs to be carefully considered, substantiated and targeted towards specific segments. What resonates for some might cause scepticism in others. This DEFRA research has found that greener segments trust advertising claims more, but this does depend on the nature of the advert. Many of the terms that people are most familiar with are as we'd expect. Things like recyclable, but interestingly, many of the terms that people are most familiar with are also under blanket bans suggested by the ASA, but also reiterated in the DEFRA reports. Things like sustainable as a generic term or environmentally friendly in themselves, which are incredibly difficult to reach and substantiate. The key to this was that although terms might be familiar, they are not necessarily understood, and therefore there becomes a risk of mis-selling and, as we call it, greenwash. The study also showed us how people use a frame of reference from one particular term to actually understand another. So, for instance, there's a very logical leap to people understanding carbon footprint and all the emphasis that's been put on that over the last few years, and that leads them into newer categories of innovation and being able, they believe, to understand the basics of, for instance, what a water footprint might be. However, actually, when we delve a little bit deeper, it's going to be the case that people won't understand 80% of what's actually involved in some of these pieces. It also showed that different terms are better for different types of product and service labelling. So, for instance, it's more people resonated with the claim energy efficient washing machine because of the life cycle usage of that washing machine, rather than a green or eco washing machine, something that actually would be difficult to substantiate as well. So it's about making it meaningful and resonating the right product and service in the right ways for different individuals. So who is green then? Let's take a look. After a literary review globally of the different segmentations, the research behind them, as well as our own research and overlaying that with a lot of UK data, we've produced a segmentation that we believe is tailored to the UK market specifically, but has lots of general principles outside of that. We like it because what we've been able to do is to break out the rough proportions of the market into general categories, with several of what we call motivational subsegments. There are several reasons that anyone is in a general segment. For instance, the inactive section that you can see towards the bottom of the chart being formed of different motivational groups inhibited towards sustainability because of, for instance, they just actually don't believe that the problem's out there, the climate's not changing, we can cope with the waste that we've got. Or for instance, to the right of that, those people that are leaving it to technology. Technology is improving all the time, they think that technology is going to solve the issue. Or potentially even worse, to the right of that, those that just feel helpless. They might actually think that there's a problem out there, something needs to be done, but personally they just don't feel that they can do anything themselves. Going through all of the different motivational subsegments in any detail would actually be the subject of a separate webinar in itself. But I think what is important to take out from this, different groups of different worldviews, how globally or locally that actually resonates to them. They've got different priorities, values, different levels of trust in organisations, in their communications. They have different motivators and different behaviours. They also, the groups are exclusive and require different treatments for maximum success. What works across healthy greens, for instance, isn't going to necessarily work across the uninformed group. So we need to make sure that we're tailoring our messages and we're actually looking at the makeup of our audience, whatever group of stakeholders that may be, and making sure that we're trying to break those messages out where possible and draw these considerations in. They also have different levels of price sensitivity. As we mentioned earlier, anyone's likely to switch. It just depends on the cost. That's going to be lesser at the green leaders end, for instance, than it might be at people like the when it suits end of the segmentation. So if we take one example pen portrait a little bit further, so this is the green leaders portion of the demographic, which has about 5% of the overall total. The green leaders are those at the higher end of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, with deeply entrenched personal views. What's more, that many of the segments have the maturity, passion, desire to search for the information and the intelligence to actively influence their significant others in these matter, forming norms and changing behaviours in the marketplace and within stakeholder groups on a much wider scale. That's why for some products, such as health food, for example, it's sometimes best to start with these individuals and work gradually into the mass market as things become proven at the greener end and the influence is spread through things like word of mouth. One more detailed motivational subsegment of the green leader sort of category is the healthy green subsegment, motivated by the health for their family, prompted by buying specific groups of food, for instance organics, keeping away from anything perceived as risky, so for example genetically modified or products that contain certain chemicals. Often we can see that the demographics of these individuals will be mid-40s females from the highest socioeconomic groups, all having or previously had good jobs, good professional jobs with older children. By understanding segments at this sort of level and then really getting into the demographics behind those into a lot more detail, which does exist, we can identify the groups within the organisational stakeholder groups that we need to approach, how to approach them, how to communicate best with them. We can understand that the media they generally consume, apply the data to understanding them, but also apply it to things like marketing lists and advertising to target them effectively. We can increase the relevance of our message and therefore our response rates and ROI. So it's useful to have these consumer segmentations, but what there is for consumers particularly of all the segments is a lot more information in the marketplace generally about them. However, many of the sales that are actually made in the marketplace, as many of us know, is in B2B marketing, business-to-business context. Therefore, we've done a piece of research that started to devise what this segmentation looks like for organisations by applying multiple variables to determine the efforts of the large sample of organisations in sustainability compared to a subjective analysis of the extent they're actually promoting on this basis. By bringing these two pieces together, we can see clearly formed segments determining what we believe is where organisations sit in terms of their worldview. So obviously organisations are made up of sometimes hundreds of thousands of people, of varying individuals, so the culture will not necessarily resonate with all of their worldviews, so this is something that we'll actually cover shortly. Most of the segments you can see are fairly self-explanatory, and they do have parallels to the segmentation that we looked at just a couple of minutes ago. However, one that is less self-explanatory is the traditional green in the top left. Our analysis identifies that there are a number of organisations and industry sectors out there which by default have lower impacts, and however they will not necessarily promote this to the same level as other organisations that are trying to differentiate themselves in this area, because these issues have always just been inherent to their sector and how they actually operate their business. Like consumers, by building profiles around the segments, we can target them and identify them at a number of different levels. But it's not enough to just focus on our customers, whether they're businesses or consumers. With the information intensity, varying agendas, influence of third parties within the green marketing and sustainability area, there's both a need and many benefits to engaging stakeholders more holistically and addressing each of their specific requirements. Some of these stakeholder groups can be seen here. We've developed a stakeholder segmentation model, particularly with employees in mind, to take the business-consumer and business-to-business segmentations one step further, exploring what happens when you put different types of individuals in different types of organisations, determined by their outlook towards sustainability primarily. Unlike the other couple of segmentations that we've looked at today, this is more hypothesis than grounded in thorough research, although we think that this has got a lot of practical applications and we're looking to take this one step further. So let us know if there's any potential partners out there that would like to try developing this further with us. The basic premise is that a company's culture can have a suppressing or multiplying effect on the individual's influence. So for instance, if you put a green individual in a green organisation, you have someone that's bought in, empowered and highly productive. If this same person was in an organisation that they felt did not value corporate responsibility, they're likely to be frustrated and try to change it as what we term a tempered radical. A person that does not value sustainability in an organisation that does is likely to be sceptical of the work of that organisation, potentially thinking that they're greenwashing and not have a good cultural fit. This same person in an organisation that doesn't value sustainability either is what we term a risky brown, as sustainability is playing little part in decisions apart from making sure that it's covered at a regulatory level and financially. So like all other types of communication, once we identify the different stakeholder segments, we can break them out so that stakeholder messaging can be targeted at the right level to resonate most effectively. Some general principles that are appropriate across all stakeholders: get buy-in at the top. Get people on board early so they're actually involved in the creation of the programs themselves. Best way to get them bought in. This applies to things like green teams as well. Having involvement keeps people supercharged and positive. Use a full channel mix to keep content interesting, integrated, fun and informative across different activities, across different channels. Also, make sure that scorecards are in place so that reporting can be done very simply. People can get a feel for before and after improvement, and everyone's being kept up to date. Now on to green marketing strategies. At the start of the green marketing era, and in some way, it was believed that people and organisations could be polarised as to being green or not. It was believed that there was only one marketing strategy in this area. Thankfully, we've moved on from there, and you can see a range of more developed strategies here. These include things like turnaround strategies. There are many organisations that started out on the wrong side of the environmental law under things like boycotts, protests, and by paying heed to these issues, they're actually going on to stay ahead of the agenda. So now some of these organisations are the ones that are taking the most impressive steps, doing the best research, lowering their impacts most significantly. They haven't all necessarily gone on to really promote this that heavily. Sometimes a little bit concerned about the things that have happened in the past, but it's been one of those things that's contributed at a brand level to helping protect their reputation and positioning them as a forward-thinking brand. Leadership strategies. Organisations that single-mindedly work to lead on the agenda at brand level can say that they're minimising negative impact, embracing the positive. This, for example, has helped M&S through their Plan A to take them from a struggling retailer to really rejuvenate them back into one of the powers on the UK high streets. There's also the possibility that particularly smaller firms can really out-niche their larger competition. This works the same as any focus competitive advantage strategy. It allows them to compete where they don't necessarily have the resources, but they've got a more focused message, target audience, and therefore they can make a bigger noise in particular areas. Finally, we've got mission-driven organisations that have worked particularly well in the cases of things like Tom's one-for-one model, where for every pair of shoes you buy, they'll actually give a pair of shoes to someone that needs them, generally in a developing country. Something that's really captured the people's hearts, it's gained them a very public message, helped them with things like promotional costs, and been able to allow them to serve both social and environmental goals while commercially making a profit. And this is true of many organisations out there that are leading in this particular market space. Whatever the strategy, there are a few key elements to organisations' green marketing and sustainability communications toolbox. Some of those that we think are most important are the actual sustainable innovation at a product level, as was mentioned in the webinar with Cranfield University, and getting that right, really leading the agenda. I mean, obviously the product or service itself is generally the most important aspect of the mix, and it's one of the places where we can lower the impacts most significantly. Collaborating with partners and wide stakeholders, because trust is such a big issue. That is one way to actually get our stakeholders on board, to help them to believe the authenticity of our claims and to get more people to support the organisation. And then finally, another good way to achieve this is through eco-labels with strong substantiation that's sat behind them. When we go into communications, many experts will tell you the same thing. Where possible, tailor the messages to the particular segments and really target those effectively. Appeal on the positives with hope, empowerment, rather than the negatives that existed particularly a few years ago in green marketing, things like punishment, fear-mongering and personal attacks. This is definitely a better way to get people on board and make them feel more effective, more empowered and motivated. Work with people, develop the dialogue, obviously test the communications as in any form of marketing, and stay away from any form of greenwash. So what is greenwash? Simply, it's misrepresentation in our marketing and sales messaging, creating skepticism. It's one of the largest discouraging factors, as we saw earlier, in driving people and organisations to act sustainably. Like a political whitewash, but applied to describe instances where promotion on ethical, sustainability and environmental grounds is inaccurate, is not proportional to the action that actually sits behind the promotion. So now we're going to look at a couple of examples of this. So the next three examples are taken from Greenwashing Index 2012. Rather than controversially pick any ourselves, what we did was just to take the top three that had been voted to the top by the members of this website. The first is an energy company, distinctly cheesy imagery, I think you'll agree, that the voters obviously felt misrepresented the organisation's position. Next, we've all heard about the problems with palm oil. This advert does little to address these concerns, as it takes us on a tour through these particular forests and tries to argue the case for sustainability. But obviously the voters on this website felt that these claims weren't actually reinforced and it was something that was tried to be glossed over. And then finally, we've got an example from an energy company that's come under attacks for both copying another organisation's brand identity in its promotions, but also the use of colours, claims and imagery. I would however suggest that many organisations and individual managers are not greenwashing through any purposeful intention to misrepresent or missell, but actually because they're not aware of the guidelines out there. They do not necessarily have the technical sustainability or marketing law awareness, and sometimes potentially within their communications department, to put the necessary steps in place to avoid the greenwash. You can avoid greenwash through some of these steps. Obviously doing things before talking about them. And when you do actually talk about them and promote them more, spend more on the doing rather than the promoting. There are examples where company logos out there as the basis for green marketing campaigns might have cost millions, but it was viewed by many that the sustainability efforts proportionally were valued an awful lot less, therefore seen as greenwash. It's also about being clear between what you actually aspire to and what you're going to do and intend to do and what your targets are than what you've actually achieved. These are very, very separate things, and therefore we need to really sort of substantiate and break those out well. But most of all, it's about being clear, specific, trying for constant improvement as ever in anything that's environmentally or socially related, and substantiating thoroughly. So DEFRA, who are leading on this issue of claim substantiation within the UK, regulated by advertising standards, after various research into sustainability communications, picked up the gauntlet for publishing guidance to avoid greenwashing and making a good environmental claim. This is a summary of some of the outtakes that we believe sit from that report. Be specific, accurate and quantify the claim. For example, if something is recycled in a product, say which bits there are actually recycled, what proportion of those recycled, what materials they come from. There are terms out there that are almost guaranteed to get you in trouble. Some of the ones that we looked at earlier in that graph, things like environmentally friendly, for instance. So just be careful to pick the right language and top and tail how you say these things to make the claim tighter in the eyes of regulation. Pseudoscience, as ever, across any category is a no-no. There are many comparative standards and clear ways of describing even the most technical processes. Simplicity is something that we should always be trying to achieve as marketers. If people think that you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes, they're unlikely to be brought into your brands. They'll be more skeptical. All this also applies to the images, the colours, the sounds, everything that we're actually doing in our promotion. So if we're using pictures of landfill sites or smokestacks with flowers kind of flying in the air from them, it's not good, obviously. It sounds cliche, but there's stock libraries, some of the most prominent ones, bursting at the seams with pictures like this, and they are being used across an awful lot of media. So back onto some of the more positive things that you can do. One is ECOLABELS, a third-party approval essentially, that you've met a standard that carries a lot of weight. However, one of the confusing things, there's just so many labels out there nowadays. The Ecolabels Index, the largest global directory, we believe, is tracking over 431 ecolabels in 246 countries and 25 industry sectors. Now that's an awful lot for any customer or stakeholder to take on board and to recognise. What's going to happen, like any industry, obviously, is that there's going to be consolidation within these, and hopefully they'll be brought down to a few that best represent the different categories and put themselves forward as actual leaders. The Global Ecolabels Monitor that this information on the left is taken from shows some of these key results. Choosing an eco-label depends on the nature of the audience, the proposition, the geography and scale. This is something that Lindsay from 3663 will touch on a little bit later. It's all well and good to have the best green marketing strategies, sustainable innovations that are clearly labelled, well communicated, but we still need to produce our marketing materials and our communication messages. We can't go on to contradict ourselves in how we actually produce those. As a marketing agency in this area, we believe that we try to balance what was termed the triple bottom line by John Elkington, the people, planet and profit. Each of those has got a different return on investment calculation and true cost attributed to it. We believe that done effectively with the right targeting, produced in the right ways, it makes a lot of sense to still continue producing communications materials, because if we put that great innovation out there, we put those products and services that we market quite regularly that will save 70% of energy or they'll reduce waste here and there, then the overall net return on investment environmentally might be more positive through producing those communications. They become part of that overall battle. But what we can do to actually really reduce the impact of our communications is to consider how we're producing them. So we need to look at, first of all, things like what we're producing them on, the inks that we're using, the mix between our printed and digital communications, the chemicals involved in those processes, making sure that we're working with the right suppliers that got the right environmental management and resource efficiency strategies behind it. We look at clever ways of creating these things. So for instance, we do mailers that don't necessarily have the envelopes involved. We do things that are maybe of different sizes and weights. We offset them with carbon offsetting. We look at the take-back programs, the recycling and disposal methods that are available for what we produce. But most importantly, we make sure that we significantly target our communications to the right segments, bring out the messages in the right ways. We make sure that they're theatrical, they're attention grabbing, and therefore the return on investment financially, but also in terms of the products and services that then go on to be sold and the social and environmental difference these can make. So if you're looking to lower your impacts across any of your communications, but also make sure that you've got a strong message that resonates well, then make sure that you come and speak to us. Right, so thank you very much for listening to me. I hope that some of this has been helpful and there's things that you can take away and use in your communications. I'm now going to pass you on to Lindsay of 3663, and she's going to show you how some of this works in practice and how that's helped them as a business. Thank you.
I think the first place to start is you can build a CSER brand, but it's very important that the brand is built on real issues and real achievements. It's really vital for us as a company that it's not about greenwash. We want to have the integrity in everything we say. So we've got a lot of groundwork that we can talk about. We've been building the brand for over 16 years, and we've got voluntary coordinators throughout the business that act on our behalf to develop the sustainability actions along each site. In addition to the voluntary roles, we've got a safety and sustainability team that are dedicated employees to the safety and sustainability workshops. We've got our accreditations. We've got our 14001 and our BS 18001. I think most companies who are serious about environmental legislation would have those, but we don't play at that. It's not just a head office accreditation so we can tick a box. We actually do put that into every site so that we're very sure that when we've got a system in place, then the systems and standards are consistent across all the individual sites of the business, which when you're running a multifaceted business with many individual sites is really important to offer the customers. We also have an additional validation, which is an ISO 14064. That's specifically to validate our waste oil recycling, and I'll come on to that a little bit later. And as a result of all our work, we've been working on reducing our carbon emissions, and we've had a lot of success. We've set ourselves some tough targets, and we're actually ahead of our targets, and we've made a reduction of 20% in our CO2 over the last 4 years. Specifically, how those reductions have been achieved. Waste oil recycling, as I mentioned previously. A lot of businesses in distribution do waste oil recycling now, so if we're going to market that, we have to make ours stand out from the rest. And we can, because it is different. We offer what we call a closed loop for our recycling, and that means that we take it from the customers and suppliers that we actually deliver oil to in the first place, and then we use the recycled product back in our fleet. So it comes from our customers and suppliers and back through to our customers and suppliers, having supplied them with the original oil to use in the first place. A real example of something that is an end-to-end system. But in addition to that, we make sure that the oil that we take and recycle doesn't go elsewhere. And that's one of the big competitive differences between our system and other people's systems. So when we talk about how effective we market, we try and make sure that the clarity of those points comes out. Other initiatives that we have in terms of transport include telematics. Not that unusual to see telematics in distribution, but still quite unusual to see it in food service. The nature of a wholesale distribution means you don't necessarily always get the full benefits of a telematic system, which is probably why it's not put in at this front end. We're not just delivering a lot of cardboard boxes. We're basically a shop window offering people the choice to choose from our range. So it's not quite as straightforward as say, an Amazon of this world. However, we've made a lot of changes with telematics, and we've seen some great reductions in driver efficiencies, improvements in driver training and behaviours, and some great route consolidation has been able to use, has come out of that as a basis. Like everybody, we'll obviously look at our energy saving and waste. A bit of a no-brainer because it's obviously a cash saving as well as an environmental benefit, but we're looking at it in terms of investment as well as cash saving. And we've seen some great improvements, up to 8% reduction in our energy consumption. Some of the specific things we've put in place include condenser optimizers, intelligent sensor lighting, and roof lighting. We've also just done a trial on LED lights that looks really impressive, and we hope to have some more to market on that in the future. It's all about transport and environment though. CSER is a full package, and our community section of what we do is really key to the heart of our company's ethos, and then has to come out strongly in any marketing initiatives that we develop. We take a local approach as well as a national approach to our work with communities and charities. Centrally, we support 2 charities, and we do a lot of interesting projects to support those 2 charities. One of the more interesting products is an actual lottery where we have lottery tickets available to our staff, which a good proportion goes to the charity in question, but actually also the employees benefit if they are to win that lottery. The activities that we've had over the years have supported, well over the last year, have supported over 230 local and 42 national charities in addition to the 2 we support centrally. And probably a very conservative estimate is we must have raised in the region of £235,000 for those good causes. What's probably more significant though is the time we give those good causes. And sometimes it's easy to shake a tin and get some money given, but actually the time that it takes to plant a tree or to paint a school is sometimes more meaningful, and that's when our local depots really help out the projects in the local communities that mean something. We do like to make sure that we stay ahead of the game in terms of what's important to our customers. That's really vital in making sure that you can market effectively afterwards, because if you're marketing an activity that hasn't got relevance with your customer audience, it isn't going to hit the right note. So we regularly do research on a formal and informal basis where we ask in detail our customers to tell us what their needs are in terms of product and health and nutrition, in terms of sourcing and locality and regional preferences for products, and what we can do to help them and our suppliers in terms of their environmental commitments. What we found out about products has shaped what we've done over the last 5 years. We were first to market with our Positive Steps range of healthier choices. Since then, most of the guys involved in wholesale, national wholesale distribution, have taken the similar steps. So we have to make sure that we keep this at the forefront of our customers' minds and really understand that we're working with them to help them meet their legislative and moral needs to meet the government's responsibility deal pledges. So we do look at our recipes, we do look at our ingredients, and we do go back to the drawing board and see if we can modify those again to reduce any of the content of fat or salt or sugar and help them have a good range of products to choose from, in addition to the natural and fresh produce that's available. This is a great one from our customers. Local sourcing was the buzzword probably about 3 years ago, and everybody just wanted to say, is it local, where's it from? But actually, the more we asked our customers about what local meant, we found that it really did mean a different thing to every different customer group. To some customers, it was really important where the product was actually delivered from. It was much more about, has this come from somewhere in my county? Has it been travelling around? Is it about road miles? Has it done too many road miles for me to feel good about consuming it? But for others, it was much more about the provenance of knowing where the item was from, the traceability of it. It was much more about the authenticity of the product line. So they might not have had a problem with the road miles as long as they knew that that cheddar cheese was definitely from Cheddar, or the Alaskan salmon was definitely from Alaska. So we have to make sure that we're giving the customers the right information on all those product lines. We are aware from our customers that this year that British is absolutely key, as it will be for everybody, I would think, in nearly all disciplines. And to be ahead of the game, last year we made sure that we identified the products that were British on our brochure and price lists. And so far we've got over 1,300 lines on our price list that have been marked with the Union Jack symbol, with many, many more to follow. This is a very tricky area. This about ethical and accredited products. There are a huge number of different marks and badges that you can get for different types of produce and products. And this really does baffle an awful lot of our customers. Some of them it's a benefit for them to obtain because sometimes they'll be able to pass on that benefit to their consumers, because consumers might understand what the mark means if they're at point of purchase. But an awful lot of the time they won't. So why would our customers want to buy the products from us? Now, if you're talking in cost sector, quite often there's a requirement from their governing bodies to make sure they've acquired products that are sustainable. But sometimes it's just something that would just swing the decision between two different types of products with a very similar quality and similar price. So we do have to make sure we're picking the right accreditations that our customers are demanding and make sure we refresh and change these lines in line with the changing needs. What this looks like for us at the moment, we would make sure we carry a stock of MSC assured certified seafood. The Red Tractor Farm assured lines are very key for our customer groups. Slightly less so fair trade. We'll always carry a stock of fair trade lines, but that's slightly less prevalent, as is organic. Not forgetting non-food, there's a number of ecological cleaning products that are really important for customers nowadays, particularly in the education sector, where they'll find it difficult to achieve their relevant eco-school status without using the right materials. We also make sure we've got a range of recycled and compostable disposable equipment. That's something that's really very important in terms of waste disposal. And a number of lines in terms of our catering equipment that are more efficient and friendly on utilities. This is the part where I come back to talking about greenwash. We make sure our report is in line with GRI standards, which isn't particularly a customer-friendly way of producing a report, but it does have the credibility of a report that a company of our size requires to deal with the FMCG marketplace. It's very important that we have all the information and it's gathered in a way that can be presented by our parent company globally. But more important than that the information in it is verified and verified as accurate. What we don't want is spin. We don't want to talk about something that we've done once and imply that it's done consistently. We don't want to talk about something that was trialled once and applied we rolled it out across the whole company. We think that if we say it as it is on the tin, and if we have done what it is we say we've done, then we get engagement from our customers and internal engagement. We've had some significant acknowledgements in terms of awards over the last 5 years, and this year we've been successful with the Green Business Award Partnership. We won the award with a customer called ISS, but we're also highly commended with the second customer. So basically, to get first and second, that was a real acknowledgement of how closely we work with our partners. In terms of effective marketing, that's a really great place to be, because it shows you that your customer can acknowledge your contribution at the same time as you're supporting them. That really does fit with the 3663 ethos.
Thank you very much for that, Lindsay. Remember to pop your questions in, and hopefully we'll cover those off in a minute. If you've got anything that you'd like to discuss outside of today's section, please just pop us a note and we'll see what we can do to help. And remember, spread the word. If you found this useful, then the recordings are available on the think-sustainability.co.uk website. Go to the webinar section and then under the videos tab, for a limited time, the duration of the webinar series, you'll be able to access the different webinars. So if you think that they'd be helpful for any of your colleagues or other business contacts, then please pop them a note with that link and share that knowledge.
We often get asked how we choose which is the right eco label for a particular product or line. And what we've done in the past is we've gone back to customers to present a number of these labels to them and to actually get the ranking from them in terms of what means most. And there's also a certain amount of research in the public domain that's available. There's recently been a piece that's covered Red Tractor, and the actual animal welfare standards within Red Tractor weren't that commonly upheld from the customers. I think the British accreditation part of it was understood, but the rest of the provenance of what that label meant wasn't really understood. So we can find out from there which of those labels have some resonance with the consumers and which don't. One of the things that's worth developing a little bit further is actually helping our customers with communicating the meaning of those labels through to their consumers. So in our previous price list, we've actually included some much more easily digestible explanations as to what those labels stand for. And we've quite often helped customers when they come back through to us to articulate on menus and other pieces of point of sale what the benefit is to people coming in on their menus if they're choosing products that have those labels next to them. In terms of things that are important to customers, we know that packaging waste is absolutely #1 priority. For lots of reasons, and we're including the commercial reasons of the increased cost of disposal of waste. Minimising packaging is a moral and a commercial necessity. On our own brand, we've been trying to reduce our packaging on our lines over the last 7 years, and we've had some significant achievements in terms of reduction of packaging waste. Some areas we've achieved over a 7% reduction, but it's very important to make sure that that stops at the right level, because if we continue to reduce packaging waste to a point where it's beyond being fit for purpose, the wastage of stock that can come as a consequence is actually even greater in terms of an impact on the environment and on commercials than the waste of the packaging itself. Sometimes it's about taking layers of packaging out, not necessarily the weight of an individual piece of packaging. So quite often you might have a product that is, has a wrap and liner inside and then has an outer piece of packaging, and you might well find that one of those pieces can be removed. And sometimes that's about changing the pack size. If a pack size is both too big or too small. If a pack size is too big, you might find that customers are more often buying it in splits, in which case if that bulk pack was reduced a little bit, you might find that it's bought as a purchase, and then it does need individually shrink wrapping to be able to put it onto a pallet. And in some cases it's because a pack is too small. So it's all about looking at demand and what's purchased from customers, and actually looking at what can be modified and made a little bit more fit for purpose. We do make sure that our packaging is all recyclable and it all carries the eco-label, so everything in our own brand will be eco-label packaged.
Thank you for sending in your questions and comments today. We hope that you found the session useful. Thank you very much to Lindsay of 3663 as well for speaking today and sharing her experience. And we hope that's the end of today's session, and we hope that you can join us at 4 o'clock next week to talk about PR and social media in the sustainability context. Thank you. Have a good week. Bye-bye.